All right, so this is the Afterburn. Thoughts, questions, comments. Okay, so if you have any of those, you can raise your hand here. Steve has the mic if you are on live stream. Rob and Kurt are monitoring the live stream. And so we can do that. I hope this teaching was a blessing to all of you as we completed this 8-part teaching on honor and shame. And now we'll get excited about whatever he wants to go and do next week, as we have now completed that journey. Hey, listen, after 55 parts, I think 8 isn't bad. All right, Steve, go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to add on to you had talked about, I just wanted to make a comment. It seems like many feel that being humbled of your status is complacency. So many always look that they are or should be moved up far sooner than they're ready. Hold on, I have more here. Yet I believe it's self-pride which causes us to want to move from where we're under or leave because they feel they're ready to move up in a status or whatever, far ready they are. To me, I just kind of felt like if you're looking to be moved up, maybe you're not ready to be moved up.
Amen. Look, there should be a contentment where you are. Now, there's 2 categories of people I'm going to describe. I remember this when I was in the martial arts. We had a guy who was a green belt for like forever. Never wanted to take a test, had no interest in moving up, and actually avoided moving up. Now, that's the wrong side of it as well. Allow those who are watching you to move you up if you're ready. On the other hand, there were those that weren't ready, that were in a rush to get the black belt when they wouldn't barely even know what they were doing as a white belt. You have to just do the things that you're doing where you are the best you can and be patient in allowing those in authority to recognize when they should move you. Because there's going to be a ministry thing too. There are some of you may think, well, I don't know why I'm not a shamash yet, or I'm not an elder yet, or why. There's a reason that you're still there. Maybe it's not because you haven't done something right. Maybe it's because the one who's supposed to appoint you is still working on some things and has gotten distracted, and that lesson has to be learned by the one who appoints you. It may have nothing to do with you, but you should be okay whatever position you're in and be content. And then be ready to say yes if someone decides to move you up and whatever they move you up to. You know, we had this discussion in the leadership way the first time well, maybe not the first, but second or third meeting that MTOI ever had as a leadership council. And we had a discussion about what do we do about ordination. It's called in the Hebrew smicha, okay? What do we do about papering people with a title and officially recognizing them with a position? Now, bear in mind that some people came to MTOI with already existing positions. They were already an elder or a rabbi or whatever they were, wherever they came from, or a shamash. And so we made a decision that it should be unanimous vote. In other words, there should be no doubt. Everybody should be in agreement that the person is what they are. In other words, you know, we talk about how birds fly, fish swim, deacons deek, elders eld, whatever, you know. Okay? So with that in mind, it should be a no-brainer. It should be obvious to all. And so we had a few, though, that weren't real pleased with the fact that when we did the vote, and it was sort of a anonymous vote, so to speak. But when we did the vote, not everybody got a full vote for even the position they already held because we were not the ones that gave them that position. They came with it already, and some of them were not qualified for the titles they already had. And so that was hard because there was a humbling that had to take place for that. There was a lot of pride and there was ego in all of that. Okay? But like for you guys watching, if I go to ordain somebody, all of you should be thinking, it's about time. Of course, it's obvious that person's, not in a bad way, it's about time, but like it should be obvious. Instead of you going, him? Why is he promoting that person to that position? It should be one of those things where it allows the elevating. Now, of course, if you're waiting on that, and you're struggling with it, maybe there's a reason why Abba's blinding the leadership and not allowing that to happen because you needed to learn to be patient and deal with your pride and ego about it. You wanted it too bad, okay? You wanted it too bad. Look, we had a gentleman that was with us once upon a time, and he was an elder that came to us in that position, wanted to be a rabbi someday, and some of the things he was doing, the leadership had to correct. and we took away the eldership. And then we said to him, though, I said, look, if you would just come under authority correctly and be allowing us to guide you and lead you, you could be a rabbi someday. You have some talent. There is some ability there. I said, but the way you're doing things right now, that has zero possibility. I told the person, look, if you're going to keep doing what you're doing, that is just not happening here. You are overstepping, forcing the issue, not humbling yourself, et cetera, et cetera. So the person, instead of saying, you're right, I'm sorry, tell me what I need to do and I'm going to do it, instead they left and ended up finding some other place that would put them in authority. And this is part of what happens in the Messianics. You got a lot of people leading congregations that other groups would never have put in authority until they found a place that somebody would let them be in authority. Well, they started their own group so they could be in authority. And that creates part of the mess that we have. A lot of people leading who don't have any idea what they're doing. All right, and it doesn't help anybody. You can only elevate at the very least to the level of your teacher. The teacher should be trying to get you to excel beyond the teacher and then pass you on to another one if that's possible, if there's another one to pass you on to. But you're limited in your growth when you're under a teacher to the limits of the teacher. So if that teacher never got only so far, then you're not getting any further either. And eventually you have to move on or just realize that you're only getting a stagnated piece of it. You're only getting a missing piece of it, okay? So for example, if I was training, a person and I only taught them 75% of what I know, and then they go out and start their own congregation, and then the next student comes in and they only teach them up to about 75% of what they know. And then think about how much is missing by the time you go 3-4 generations down from that. In discipleship, you'd want to make sure I'm giving you 100% of what I know, and you got to stick around for it. You got to be patient, and you got to wait till the master decides when to give it. You see this play out a little bit in the Karate Kid movie where the kid's getting real impatient. And, his teacher says, you asked me to teach you. That means I get to decide how it's done, how fast it's done, and you don't necessarily understand what I'm doing, but you have to trust me. And that was a big problem for the student to trust the teacher, because the student doesn't often see what's happening or why something's necessary. But do you trust? Remember, the whole book is about trust, belief, faith versus fear, doubt, etc. So, can you trust the teacher? Can you trust the process? Can you be patient? All right, next question. Michael?
In the beginning, we started with Luke 14, so that's where my question is at. Almost towards the end of the first verse,
right?
He talks about how Yeshua's I guess it was not Yeshua, or maybe it was Yeshua. Who exactly was breaking bread?
Yeah, Yeshua with the Pharisees.
With the Pharisees, that breaking of bread, kind of. If you could elaborate on that, because he's the Pharisees in my mind are kind of people that I guess aren't really honorable, and so to speak.
Well, I mean, you can't completely hold everybody as a Pharisee. Think of it more like a political position, or think of it as a denomination. They held very specific beliefs that were different than the Sadducees, different than the Essenes. I mean, just like you have so many different denominational ways of looking at things in Christianity today, Judaism had the same problem back then. It still does to a certain degree, but there's very few denominations compared to what was back then. Belief systems, we'll call it. So the Pharisees were a very specific school of thought. Now, the leadership, the rulers of the Pharisees, just like the rulers in a lot of groups, tended to be in hypocrisy, tended to be a problem. And so, they could have been doing hamotzi. I mean, they got together at Shabbat. They're about to break bread. They're going to have a meal together. And then he was talking about this situation from there. Does that answer the question? Okay, thank you. Next question. Where's the mic? Okay, who had the hand up over here? Lisa?
I just wanted to ask a question about...
Put the mic right up at your mouth. There you go.
Sorry. Just wanted to ask a question about reproving people in public. Mm-hmm. Is that something only an authority does? Because there's been situations that I've come across where people have got real personal with me, and having that white personality, I don't want to be confrontational.
You know, that's got to come from authority.
That's got to come with authority.
It's got to come from authority. Look, if you are being attacked and whatever's happening in a public way, bear in mind the public, if they're watching, should understand what's happening. In other words, the people are showing themselves and exposing themselves in a certain way. You don't need to correct it necessarily. Correction needs to come from a relationship of a vertical structure. Okay, so if you do something publicly in a structure where there's authority, like if I'm in the authority position, then you put me in a place where I have to correct it publicly. Otherwise, people are going to assume that the leadership endorsed it or was okay with it. And that's where the correction needs to be done publicly. Because people read into it, well, leadership didn't say nothing. I guess whatever they did must be okay. It must be appropriate to behave like that. So that's where it comes. If it's just people kind of getting in each other's face and everything else, other people watching should recognize the immaturity of the behavior, and you being at peace and taking the higher ground is the right way to go and to avoid conflict. All right? I try not to get in and correct if I don't have to, but sometimes people force the issue because now I have to be concerned with what other people are assuming or thinking. Because if I allow it on the MTOI, for example, group page, the group inside the group, and people know that's our group, then people might assume, oh, that behavior must be approved because nobody said anything. So I have to say something. I can't just say it privately. The public needs to hear that that behavior is not appropriate. Okay? All right, next question or comment? Okay, Rabbi Tom in the back. Because remember, all of this is about reflecting. How does something reflect on somebody? Everything we do reflects on Messiah. Everything that he does reflects on the Father. Everything we do, in essence, reflects on the Father, because if it reflects on the one above us, it reflects all the way up the chain. Okay? So as the people would have treated one of the apostles, that goes all the way up through Messiah and the Father. And then their students through the apostle, through the Messiah. It just goes all the way up. It reflects and brings honor or shame all the way up the chain. And so therefore, it's required at some point in the chain. Look, Paul was being accused of teaching in circumcision. Paul was called to Jerusalem in a very public way to deal with that issue. And looking for James then to make a declaration of the rendering of a decision as to how that would be handled. Okay? And so the same thing you see in Acts 15 with the circumcision issue. All right? Bring it into the structure, the appropriate structure, the Bet Din or the house of judgment. And so you see how these things can be done. Okay, Rabbi Tom?
Thank you. Several times we came across the word humility, and I think a synonym is also meekness. Some time ago, someone said, "Don't mistake my meekness for weakness." And I think that's a mistake sometimes we can make, or we can misunderstand that being meek means being weak. Both Avraham and Moshe were humble and meek people, but they were also people that you didn't want to get on the wrong side either. And Yeshua was certainly the meekest of all men, but he also is the man who took a whip and cleaned out the temple too.
Amen. Amen. I appreciate your comments, and cinnamon is one of my favorite flavors. Okay. Now, he said synonym, but anyway. This is an important thing to understand that, being humbled and having humility doesn't mean you're a doormat, doesn't mean that you have no strength at all. It means that you're very careful and selective about when you show that strength and how you show that strength, and whether or not it's your job to show it. It may be leadership's job. It may be just letting the Father, deal with it himself. And that's part of what we read today in some of the verses was allow for that to play out. It's not your job necessarily to render that. There is a judge that will take care of all things. He will not be mocked. People will reap what they sow. We have that verse. Okay, Sarah Beth?
Question, made a connection. I want to see if it was correct or needs tweaking. In Romans 2:4, or do you despise the riches of his kindness and tolerance and patience, not knowing that the kindness of Elohim leads you to repentance? This reminded me of Yonah and his story of thinking that Yahweh would give repentance would give that patience to Nineveh and not wanting it, but at the same time, he was receiving just as much patience from Yah. Is that correct?
Yes, but also remember that, he had a process that Jonah didn't understand. Jonah didn't understand that they looked all evil, they were doing all these things or whatever. In his mind, he didn't want to go to Nineveh, but yet what was needed was simply a man to speak with authority of Elohim. And so when Jonah showed up, they listened. They were ready to hear. But he didn't know that. What he needed to do was trust that Yahweh knew what he was doing. And that's where the problem is. He's like, well, Yahweh, you don't seem to understand. Those people over there, they're sinners. They're crazy. I'm not going over there. They're evil. They deserve to die. See, you can't come from a place of, Yahweh, you don't know what you're doing. What you do is you come from a place of, I don't see and I don't understand what you're doing, but I trust it. That's where you need to come from. And so that's what the lesson that Jonah learned. Okay, Rebbitzin?
Okay. I wasn't going to say anything, but then she brought up the whole Jonah thing. So, you were talking about esteem and giving someone esteem or giving Yahweh esteem or people esteem is lifting up.
Right.
And then humbling or shame is putting down. And what I found interesting was when I was studying Jonah this time for creating the Parsha Pearls, there were a lot of verses about when Jonah was not obeying Yahweh. They used words like he found a ship going down to, they used a lot of references of down, like sleeping down in the innermost part of the ship, down in the belly of the fish. It was all words relating with down, which was bringing shame to Yahweh.
Amen.
And then when he did the opposite, it was going up.
Amen. But now also let's take the same thing and see how the structure vertically, how it affected the people around him. When Jonah was doing wrong, everybody around him suffered. Until he finally said, I'm the reason you're suffering, okay? But yet when he chose to understand, and after humbling himself to go and do what he needed to do, then the blessing came also. So leaders need to understand the reason that they're worthy of double respect and everything else is that they have to be willing to step up and do things that others would not want to do. All leaders have those Jonah moments where they're just like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to do this. I don't, want to deal with that stuff. And yet, even Moses had that moment where he said, Abba, if I've done anything, Yahweh, that's been favorable in your eyes, please just kill me. I think I'm going to see my own evil and kill somebody myself. And so we have those moments. And so it's worthy of double respect because until you've been in the position, you don't understand the challenges and the burden that's on a leader. Now, of course, you don't understand that because you've watched a bunch of leaders that didn't understand the burden either. They just used it for their own personal gain and were just living up life and having a great time. But there is a huge burden in the leadership, a responsibility in the leadership, and that's why they're worthy of double respect. Who's next? All right, live stream.
Okay, from Andy Dennis, referring back to Luke 16, says, in respect to the obligation to invite, etc., that you were discussing, is this connected to the Torah commandment not to accept a bribe?
Basically. Okay, but it's not just about accepting a bribe. You're almost creating a bribe situation. Okay, if you're only inviting those that will invite you, you're basically bribing them because you're obligating them, or at least you think you are, to then invite you. So you end up inviting people that you don't even like or you really wouldn't want to be there, but you want to be invited to what they're doing. And so this is that, so it's receiving and creating a bribe situation, yes.
Okay, I didn't get a name on this one. It says Romans 2:12, is Israel not judged now in this life? We have blessings and curses. And they're referring back to Ezekiel 18:30.
Well, look, Ezekiel 18:30 says, therefore I judge you, O house of Israel, everyone according to his ways, declares the Master Yahweh. Repent and turn back from all your transgressions, and let not crookedness be a stumbling block to you. Cast away all transgressions by which you transgress, etc. Now, That's a theme that, though, plays out from the Exodus 19, beginning of covenant, all the way through. Whenever they messed up, he said, get away from those things, stop the transgressions, repent, turn around, get back on the path. As far as judgment, we do have a verse that says, judgment is now on the house of Elohim. The thing is, just because you're born into, quote unquote, the covenanted circumcised group doesn't mean that you're actually covenanted, doesn't mean that you understand that you've made choices, that you've made decisions. Listen to the Millennium and Kingdom teaching, listen to discovering your identity. These things will help deal with those things. So, but more importantly, let's stay out of the seat where we're trying to figure out who's being judged, who's not, who gets in, who doesn't get in. Very bad place to be. It leads to foolishness like dispensationalism. Hey, they blew it. This is about us now, and all those kind of things. Okay, let's stay away from that.
All right, from Susan Armstrong, says, Rabbi, why are there people not walking in wisdom and understanding and still receiving esteem from the world?
Okay, I don't understand the question. I mean, I can't tell you what they're motivated, but yeah, there are people that are doing all kinds of dumb things, and the world esteems them very highly. Why they're not walking in wisdom? Because people are stiff-necked, hard-hearted, me, I, self-sovereign. They want to do it their way. I mean, all the things that I've taught for years. Why does the world esteem them? Because the world has its own standards of what they think should be honored and esteemed. It's foolishness, but it is what it is.
All right, from Olivier and Janet Hoffman. Says,
wait, hold on. One more piece. A lot of it also is because they want it now. Okay? They don't want to wait for what he's going to give us in the future. They want the esteem now. Okay, go ahead, Olivier and Janet.
All right, Rabbi, Romans chapter 15, verse 2, by finding the goodness in people and lifting them up, even if they're wrong, even if they wrong us, with proper fear of Yahweh, this will help us not to judge others. Is this right? Correct?
Well, look, if they're doing wrong, depending on what they're doing, you may want to just avoid the situation and not involve yourself in stuff. You can pray for them. You can encourage them if you do get a chance to interact with them, that they need to maybe consider the stuff they're doing and pray about it or seek counsel or something without you getting overly critical. But realize it says, let each one of us please his neighbor for his good to build him up. But again, there's different instruction about avoiding and not getting involved with those that are doing wrong, okay? But give them encouragement when they're struggling and that kind of thing, yes.
From Timothy and Rachel Gibson, says, how should we establish leadership when the congregation is so far away?
I'm not sure about the question. I mean, look, you have leadership is a voluntary choice of submitting under authority. It could be done at any distance. We could do it with people via a phone call. You could do it versus via some sort of video chat. I mean, it really has to do with your decision to have a relationship with somebody, recognize and put yourself under them as an authority, and then be submitted to that. Distance really doesn't have anything to do with it. It's a lot easier to do when it's locally, but you know what? There are some people locally I've never talked to, like almost ever, and there are people that are at a very far distance I talk to all the time. That's just true. Okay? I mean, there are people in this congregation here locally I've never sat down with once. And there are other people that I've had video chat with dozens of times. I'm not, by the way, there's no judgment on that. It's just, so the distance is my point, has nothing to do with it. Okay? The distance has more to do with the socialization factors, the idea of coming together and having community. If you have a congregation locally, those are things you can't really do at a distance. Not as easily. You can do some chats and interaction with people. The idea of sitting together and fellowshipping live and in person cannot really be done at a distance. But the leadership part, the submission part, you could do that without any distance issues.
All right. Kind of a follow-up on that one from Kaylin Lee. What does leadership look like in a military family? Instance like absent husband and away from a congregation, live streamers.
Okay, so what does it look like in a military family where the husband's not there because he's on a deployment somewhere? All right, so that's something, by the way, that the husband should be working out with someone who can be a covering while he's out of the area. That could be through a leadership person like myself, or something that is worked out where so she has somebody that she can go to when he's not that reachable. Okay, and that doesn't, again, have to do with distance. That could be something that's done virtually, because pretty much you can call anybody from almost anywhere and reach them and do some things like that. But that would be something that the husband and wife should work out so that they've already arranged for those things. Otherwise, what happens is you potentially open up a usurping problem. And you don't want, as the wife, to then do something that usurps your husband's position, but that rather you should be able to say, while you're gone, who do I go to? While you're gone, can you give me somebody that I can go to if I can't reach you? I don't want to disrespect you. I want to, if I can, I mean, if you can reach them, you can reach them, but if you can't, you can't. So then what do you do in those situations where you have nobody to reach? So the couple should work that out in advance. Okay? Next.
From Olivier and Janet Hoffman, says, Rabbi, Romans 2:4, is this saying we are despising his kindness, tolerance, and patience, and at the end of despising him when we judge others?
Say it again.
It says, Romans 2:4.
Yeah, I'm reading it.
Is saying we're despising his kindness, tolerance, and patience, and at the end, despising him when we judge others.
Yes, I mean, that's in essence what it's trying to say. So look, if you're going to go ahead and practice the same wrongs that were described in verses 2 and 3, he says you're actually despising the way he treated you. You're not really appreciating that he treated you a certain way, and you're not then reciprocating and passing that along. Okay? Same thing I've been saying. As it comes down, as it also goes up. Okay? If you are treating those below you, so to speak, those that you're interacting with in a certain manner, then that reflects how you are also appreciating what was done for you. So if you were treating with patience and kindness and all of that, and you're treating somebody with a lot of impatience and harshness and etc., then you're not really appreciating what was done for you.
Okay, from Jersey Girl, says, I'm confused on these church-type positions. Aren't we all disciples of Messiah?
Yes, we're all disciples of Messiah if we're actually being discipled by Messiah, meaning just because you read the Bible and you're aware of a lot of things doesn't mean you're discipling. It might just mean that you're learning information. I mean, discipling is a relational thing. On the other hand, that doesn't change the fact that there is structure scripturally, and in that structure comes a lot of lessons that we're talking about here. Like the lesson about understanding how you're treated and how you treat is going to teach a lot of lessons of appreciation based on how you're treated, etc. Okay, so yes, on some level, we are all brothers, we're all sisters, we're all of Messiah, of the body. But within that structure, or within that context, there is structure. Because without structure, we have chaos, we have confusion, we have all kinds of problems. And we also don't get to rehearse and practice how we treat the king that's coming, because we're having structure coming. You know, we're looking forward to something called the kingdom, not the forever commune or whatever. You know, it's a kingdom. That means there will be a king. And we're not confusing, by the way. All of us, whatever image came in your mind, you're not confusing it. King means king. Full autocratic authority. Okay? Complete, full authority. So there's a structure. We're told about that structure by Paul in Ephesians chapter 6, that there are people that we need in structure. We're told by Yeshua as he makes disciples and tells them to go make disciples of nations. He says, go out there and duplicate what I've done with you. There's structure. Paul submits to structure when he comes to Jerusalem and submits to James in Jerusalem. There's absolutely structure. Okay? And by the way, everything that we read in chapter, must have been in Timothy. Okay? So in 1 Timothy, what we read in 1 Timothy was all about structure. Okay? When it talks about, actually, everything in Timothy is about structure. Chapter 3 is about, if a man longs for the position of an overseer. In chapter 5, we're talking about, let the elders who rule be counted worthy of double respect. In chapter 6, let those who are servants under a yoke. I mean, everything's about structure. And he's not telling you in any of these chapters that the structure is the problem. He's always mentioning how we function within the structure can cause a problem. It can also bring blessing. The choice is ours. How do we function within structure? Okay. You got to remember, and whoever wrote that question, it's a good question from the point of view that there are no lack of abundant attacks on scriptural structure. And there are some very prominent Messianic, quote-unquote, ministries out there that have teachings that are very popular that are completely against everything that I've just told you about structure. Who want to say that there are no leaders, it's all, it's a circle of elders singing Kumbaya that make whatever decisions or whatever, and we're all led by the Spirit. There is no vertical structure. They don't, obviously, let me rephrase that. They're still dealing with hurt, wounded feelings or experiences from the past, and so therefore they cannot accept the reality of structure. And so it's that pain that is causing them to reject structure. And you can't blame them from the point of view of they probably suffered at the hand of structure. I mean, I can put the hands up. Everybody that ever suffered under the hands of structure, all of us pretty much, right? You've been under some structure that either abused you, neglected you, took unfair advantage of you, or whatever, just. So we have a natural, worldly point of view, a natural aversion to structure. However, we were born as children where we've understood that we need structure. Children flourish under structure. They do not do well under no supervision. You've seen children that have no supervision and they are just out of control. I've watched some children and I've watched the parent. People don't come here anymore, so I don't feel embarrassed to mention, but I watched a mother and a daughter. Well, that daughter was a brutal, spoiled kid. And the mother, I don't think ever, and at least not in our presence, ever disciplined that kid. Ever. And it was brutally obvious that was probably what was going on at home as well. That kid had no sense of structure and therefore was out of control. What is Torah? Structure. Okay? The whole framework of the universe is held together by the laws of science, etc. That's structure. Physics and chemistry and biology hold everything together. Your body is mostly water, but you're not a puddle. You have skin and other things that keep, that's structure. You have bones, you have structure. Holds you together. All right? Next question. But just be aware when you're out there, there's no lack of attacks on everything I just taught. But it's all coming out of fear and pain. Okay? It's not coming out of Scripture. Go ahead.
Okay, from Randall McFarland. It says, on the last night of Sukkot, I sat with Rabbi in the chaplain group, and one of the chaplains said it was my duty to go out and share. It's my understanding that unless we are learned, we should not.
Yeah, listen, there was a chaplains conference going on right at the end when we were leaving, and they're all coming from the Christian mindset of, quote unquote, the Great Commission. It is absolutely not your job to share like uninvited, without people asking you any questions. It's not your job to do that unless you've been trained specifically to be a sent one, an apostle. Okay, apostle simply means a sent one. It's not like this giant high title. It's just, it's a role that people have. You are responsible to be prepared to answer for, about your belief and what you believe, and that's important. But we are not required to go bother anybody or do anything because that undermines the understanding of the basic foundation, which is none comes unless the Father draws. Go listen to the Father and the Son teaching. I make it really clear in the first couple of parts of that. From Scripture. I mean, we show verse upon verse that says that very clearly. Okay, Matthew 28 is not a great commission for all people. It was an instruction to those that he had trained for a period of time and said, I've trained you to do this, now it's time to go do what I trained you to do. Go duplicate the process. I discipled you, you've seen it, you've experienced it, you've had it done with you, now go do that with others. By the way, he also said when you walk into town and there's nobody there that's drawn to you by the Father, dust yourself off, go to the next town. He doesn't tell them go knock on every door and bother everybody. You walk in and the Father will draw to you or not. Amen? All right, next question.
From Deborah Fagan, says, question, I've come from a Mormon background, what is it today that an elder and a deacon are each responsible for?
Okay, so that's a good question. And I don't really know the Mormon structure, so I could just speak to what I think about the structure today. But also, let me just go back to what Randall said just for a second by saying this. Again, let's be careful that we're receiving any kind of an understanding or guidance or halakhic interpretation from somebody who is not already halakhically trained. So if you're listening to Christians at a chaplain's conference, then you're probably going to be getting, their, incomplete understanding that Christianity generally has. Okay. Now, as far as the positions, Timothy is told and given guidance in 1 Timothy that there are those that are called either bishops or elders or overseers, and these are ones who teach and have a certain level of responsibility. We're also taught throughout the Tanakh as well as the New Testament the idea of being a servant and the idea of the shamash. The shamash is the servant, and so as opposed to just being an eved or a slave, okay, but we're talking about the servant. So in the structure of assemblies, we generally have those that handle physical things. They would be in the Hebraic understanding before there ever were Christian things, the idea of the shamash, okay, who did a lot of the physical things and maintained a lot of the physical stuff that needed to be maintained. Whereas the zaken is what we would call an elder, but the zakanim are those who can teach. Those have a counseling responsibility, an instructional responsibility that lead to a higher position of leadership in a congregation, okay? Then, of course, the rabbis, whether you like the title or not, I don't really care. That's your problem or your issue. You can listen to the teaching I did on that. But if you prefer the word, overseer, whatever it is, this is, again, the person who has an even greater understanding of Scripture, has a responsibility to teach. But then those teachers fall into several possible categories you have in the fivefold ministry. You have shepherding people that could teach. You've got teachers as one of the fivefold. And you've got apostles who could be teaching. You also have prophets that could be teaching. The evangelists, I'm not so sure how much teaching they're doing, but they're more the promoters that are getting people excited about what's going on. But you have these things that are positions, okay? Of course, Christianity has totally twisted and mangled that because, they'll tell you, you need to come to this big tent meeting. We have an evangelist coming in to speak. No, you guys promoting the meeting are the evangelists. The guy coming in to speak is somebody that you would maybe think of as a prophet or teacher or some other thing. Of course, if it's Christian, whatever it is going to be a mess. But I'm talking about as far as the role of the position, okay? So the apostle is the kind of person that comes in and he travels he's a sent one. He travels, shows up someplace, and if people are interested, will help set up an assembly. Keeping it simple. Okay, teachers will then instruct the basics, the halakha, they'll instruct the people that are there. Shepherd will care for the nurturing and needs of an assembly as a shepherd would with a flock, all right? And then the prophet's going to be the one that gets in your face and says, you've been taught by the teacher, let's get with it. Why aren't you doing this? Don't you know that you're risking death? Don't you know that you have eternal life on the line here? Wake up, okay? So hopefully that sort of makes sense. Now, of course, the evangelist is the one that sees what's going on, gets excited when the apostle shows up and starts telling all their friends, hey, you got to come hear these guys and what they're doing and check it out. It may be cool and important. They're not the ones doing the teaching. They're just saying, hey, you need to check this out. So you guys do that sometimes on your Facebook pages, you evangelists. You're there right away when a teaching comes out, you repost it because you want people to see it. That's more an evangelist sort of mindset. That doesn't mean you're an evangelist, but it's an evangelist sort of mindset. You want to get people excited about something you're excited about. Did that answer the question? Kind of the 5 basic roles. And by the way, none is higher than the other. They have just different roles, okay? The apostle's probably not going to stick around. The prophet's not going to be there most of the time. The shepherd and the teacher will be there probably all the time, So in some ways, they're going to be much more important than the apostle or the prophet once the thing gets started. Now, to get it started, the apostle will be the most important because he's the one that's going to come in and launch the thing in the first place. Okay? So people have their importance and their value in different circumstances, some more above the other based on the need at the time. Okay, the children are starting to come back in. What else you got, Rob?
All right, comment from Pete Lamb. It says, what I take from this teaching is that when we seek to exalt ourselves, we will be humbled by Yahweh. We should instead be seeking to serve, especially the humbled.
Amen. If you choose to humble yourself, he can elevate you. If you choose to elevate yourself, he will humble you. Which one do you want him doing? Okay? If you elevate yourself, you push him in a position to humble you. If you humble yourself, you put him in a position where he can esteem you. Which one do you want him doing? Okay, next one.
From Angela Dudenhofer says, what are the hallmarks leadership looks for in a person when deciding if that person is ready for discipleship?
Okay, and I'm surprised you didn't write that last one down. It was good. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my little scribe over there who likes to write down my little quotes. But anyway, discipleship is a relationship by agreement. Okay, so what would I be looking for to disciple? I'm not really sure that we have the physical ability to truly disciple in the structure of today's society with the craziness and the busyness and the need to earn a living that people have, etc. Because the disciple literally would do what you see them doing in Yeshua's day. They would live together in some place. They would eat together. They would travel together. They would literally spend pretty much 24/7 with each other. And the disciples would be observing the teachers every word, every action to learn how to do, how to be, how to act, whatever the circumstance was that they were trying to train in. In Yeshua's case, they were being trained for every aspect of life. Now, if you were training with discipling with a fisherman or with a farmer or with a shepherd, well, then you would be mostly concerned in watching how they handled those duties. And you'd watch the way they dealt with their nets or their hook on the line, or the way they handled the wood and the hammer if it was carpentry, or the way they handle a sheep that was problematic. You'd learn and watch their body language and what would come out of their mouth and their attitudes. You would learn to imitate them because you would see them as a success at what they do. Because otherwise, why would you disciple unless they had what you wanted skill-wise in something? You would go select somebody who was at the top, so to speak, of their skill sets in the area that you wanted to learn. It could be music, it could be art, it could be any kind of skill that we would normally, in the world today, we talk about apprenticeship. Okay? So what would I be looking for? First and foremost, it would have to be somebody that is absolutely 100% ready to be trusting and submissive in that situation, because there cannot be any arguing in discipleship. There can be discussion. There cannot be arguing. Okay? You cannot argue with your teacher. You disagree that much with your teacher, why is he your teacher? Because then you're not trusting your teacher. That may sound very cultish to some of you. No, it's just the need in terms of that level. Now, you could be a student sitting here and just listening to the teachings and do what you want. But if you're going to disciple, which means I as your teacher, whoever the teacher is, right? We're using me as an example. I have to pour that much into you. I do not have the time to argue. There's no value in that. Either you believe and trust that I'm going to get you where you're trying to go because I understand where you're trying to go and I agree to that relationship, or you don't. Okay? Next question.
All right, from Tony. This is a question. Romans 2, verses 8. Could this verse be speaking not only about following Torah, but those who try to oppose leadership/rabbis?
Well, because that would be Deuteronomy 17 Torah anyway. Okay, so yes, it says, but wrath and displeasure to those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth and do not obey unrighteousness, etc. Look, Deuteronomy 17 addresses that quite clearly. It says, look, you are arrogant if you come to leadership and don't submit to what they say. Now, of course, you don't have to come to leadership, but if you're going to go, then the arrogance comes in. Now, of course, you could also be arrogant by not going to leadership as well. Only between you and Abba will they know if that's being arrogant or not, but that's not visible. But if you go to leadership, it now becomes visible based on whether or not you listen or not, and that could be then a problem where it says in this way, when you have someone acting that way and you kick them outside the camp and you deal with them that way, you're purging evil from the camp, because that could be contagious. That could be imitated. If you're going through something and nobody knows it, and you should go to leadership and you don't, that can't be contagious. Nobody knows. But if you start talking to people and they say to you, well, you probably should talk to the leadership, and then you don't, now we start creating a problem. That's where an arrogance comes in, or a pride issue comes in, or a fear and doubt thing, and that can be contagious. And that's not good in the body, okay? And there are people out there that I've talked to who have told me, people I've talked to have talked to others of you who said, well, I told them to call you. I've told them to seek leadership. And then they don't. So, because people say that they were approached, and they said, well, I'm not leadership. So when they approached me, I said, well, you need to go call the leadership. And then they'll ask me, by the way, did so-and-so call you? And I'm like, nope. But you should. Okay, what's next?
Okay, from Alana. Says the fivefold leadership positions. Can women also be placed in them, or are they only held by men?
Okay, we're going to get that men-women thing question. This is a good question to address, and I guess on a regular enough basis. Ladies, I know you'll all agree. If you've heard me say this before, you already know the question, you already know the answer. This is the reality within the context of Scripture. Before we address, let me say it this way. Ladies, can you all agree that we want our men to first step up and be men? Okay? Now, can we all agree that if I have ladies doing anything the men should be doing before the men are doing it, that they probably will then end up not doing it? Okay, so let's not have this discussion about what women should be doing till I get the men doing it. Is that fair? Because it shouldn't be a distraction. Because if I say, yes, once we get the men do it, whatever answer I give will only cause more potential strain or problems. Let's keep it one step at a time. Everybody will benefit if I get the men to where they need to be. Then we can talk about what the ladies should or shouldn't be doing. All right? I think that's simple. Okay, so I'm not taking any position on what the ladies should or shouldn't. I think that right now it will only hurt the system to bring the ladies up and not have the men do it first, because the men will never do it. I think the ladies understand that, yes, there's no question the men should be doing these things. The question is, should the ladies be able to do it also? And my answer is certainly not until we get the men doing it. Then we can talk about it. Is that fair? Okay, so that's always been my consistent answer, by the way, for 20 plus years. Just so if anybody knows. And still, the men are not there. They're getting better. They are. They're starting to step up. When I ask for somebody to step up and pray, and I say hands up, the men's hands, more and more of them are going up, ready to go, knowing full well I might call on them to do. I got to get the men doing what they need to do before I give it to the ladies. The men will not do it if I start putting you ladies up there. They'll just kick back and just not do a thing. Can't have that. It's not helping the body. All right, next question. And by the way, men, you need to be doing this stuff. Okay, you guys are supposed to step up at the very minimum. Whether the ladies should or shouldn't is not even the point. You need to do it. This stuff you do. Now, the fivefold, no, you don't need to be pushing yourself towards one of those things. Do what you need to do so that you can be recognized as already having one of those gifts. The leadership's role is to observe and identify the gifts you have. And then we can decide to say, hey, I'd like to groom you towards shepherd or teacher or apostle or whatever it is that you might have a talent or gift for. Next question.
All right, from the Klein family, it says, Rabbi, 1 Timothy 6:7, so the gain is okay when received as a reverence or a claim by others or our Father.
1 Timothy 6:7, 6 what?
It just says 6/7, so I don't know.
Chapter 6, okay. Because verse 7 doesn't really talk about that. Okay. Oh, no, verse 6. Okay, but reverence with contentment is great gain. All right. Look, the bottom line is that there is great gain in this whole process of having the vertical thing correct. If you give esteem and if you come in alignment with what's well-pleasing in your Father's sight, which also brings him esteem, then there can be great gain for you. That gain, by the way, could be issues and things that are in your life can be removed, and the problems that are removed. Health can be better. Your finances can be better. Your family life can, all kinds of gain. It doesn't have to be money. But there's great gain in getting vertically correct. And in getting vertically correct, that brings esteem, honor, and reverence to the Father. And then that can then be bestowed back on you. Again, that's within structure. Without structure, you don't have any of that. What else? Because we need to wrap this up because I'm fading quick here. I'm congested and I'm not feeling great. Okay, we good? All right. Okay, do we have the children? Everybody up from upstairs, come back down. Shabbat Shalom. Shavua Tov. We love you.